Today on the PIO podcast, our guest is Ted Czech, a former reporter turned public information officer who has been on both sides of the media relationship, first as a reporter and also as an author of a book called Saving the Beast. A recovering reporter reflects on America's broken media and how to fix it, where he takes an honest look at what is really driving uh, today's journalists and how they can do better. Today, we're diving into this tension and realism and what it takes to rebuild credibility in today's media landscape. Ted, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. It's great to be here.
Ted, so let's hear your background. I mentioned that you were a former reporter, but what about your background in the newsroom? Tell us how you did that and why you came to the reality side.
Sure. So first, I got a degree in law enforcement or in criminal justice. That was my original plan way back when I graduated from high school. I wanted to be either a cop or a federal agent. But once I graduated in 1992 from my first college, I kind of had a change of heart. And so I decided I wasn't there maturity wise and psychologically. I was worried about the stress. So I always enjoyed writing, and my mother was a journalist, and my grandmother was a journalist. So you could say it was kind of in the blood. And so I took one course in journalism, and I was hooked. So I was off and running with that. Stayed with newspapers, but as the digital revolution came around, I started doing some podcasting, and I started doing other video segments. Facebook Live was a big thing because I was a breaking news reporter covering a lot
Right.
of crime and emergency news. So I would just turn on my Facebook Live when I would arrive at a scene, and I would take the viewers with me. So you wouldn't see my face. You would be seeing the action, and you would hear me. I would be narrating, and then I would maybe come across a witness, and I would interview them, or a fire chief or a police chief or whomever. So that's what I did for 25 years. Some in New England, but then I moved to Pennsylvania in 1998, South Central PA, kind of about an hour north of Baltimore, Maryland, in a county called York. And so, but about 5 years ago, I transitioned from journalism to public relations. I got hired by the county of York as their public information officer.
Excellent. All right. So when you look back, what do you think you understood about the other side that turned out to be wrong?
About journalism or about public relations?
No, about public information.
Oh, okay.
Because that's I'm looking at your perspective as a journalist.
Absolutely. So as a reporter, we looked, and I'll say we because kind of collectively in the newsroom, we looked at public relations as the dark side. That's what we would call it. We would call it the dark side because as a reporter, you owe your allegiance to the truth. You are serving your audience, and you're in pursuit of the truth. And whereas we looked at public relations and we said, wow, those guys, they're spin doctors, they're gatekeepers to, their paychecks are signed by people, so they have to make those people look good. They owe their allegiance to their employer. And that's the way that we looked at it, honestly.
Yeah, and things have changed over time, and since you mentioned Facebook Live, and since we've gotten to more the breaking news thing and getting news out quicker and breaking it before anybody else, your competition has become an issue. Now you do have some journalists that are cutting corners and doing things that are questionable, just like you had gatekeepers that were PIOs that would never, they never really gave any information whatsoever, or if they did, it was heavily slanted one direction, and it just wasn't fair and balanced. And I hate to use that phrase because then it would be differently. But
Right.
All right, so you've been on both sides. What frustrates reporters most about PIOs is that what do they fully understand?
I don't know that they're always keeping in mind that at times, not all the time, but sometimes the levels that you have to go through in order to confirm information before you can disseminate it to them. There are times, so in my day to day, I'll get calls from reporters because I also represent emergency management, but also 911. So they'll call me and they'll say, "Hey, I heard on the scanner there's a fire." Well, I can look in the narrative of what the dispatchers are typing in, and I can give them okay, this is what the call's for. Here's the general location. It's a two alarm fire. I can give them the kind of the basics of it, and that's not a problem.
Right.
But if it's something of a heightened nature, then there's certain protocols that come into play, and I can't just spit something out to them immediately. So, and then they're of course, always concerned about their deadlines. They've got deadlines. They've got editors yelling at them. So, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes they might not have that top of mind.
Yeah, I know. When we went to before right before we went to fully digital radios, and then the reporters lost scanner traffic for a while.
Mm.
One of the things that I would always get calls from, oh yeah, we heard there's this crash there. How bad is it? And I would go, well, I'm not listening to the radio, and I let me look and I'll see. And well, it says it's a 4-car crash. Well, that's pretty bad. And I go, well, not necessarily. Not if they just tap bumpers and they're blocking an
Right.
intersection.
That's a
I
very
mean, it might
subjective
not be a
thing.
big deal. I said I have to wait for the street people to tell me what's going on, or I've got to call them, bother them while they're on the call for information so that I can feed it to the media. So I know sometimes that can be frustrating for those things
Well, yeah,
on that end.
the art of covering breaking news is kind of a lost art, I think. I think that because newsrooms have been decimated because they've lost money, so they're working with less reporters. You have less reporters to dedicate to running out on calls. I used to run out as a reporter, run out on just about everything, every single bank robbery, and actually bank robberies don't happen as often as they used to, but because of all the cameras and everything. But every single crash that had there was, well, we I don't know if it's universal, but a class one call. So where you've got some serious injury, every class one crash, every bank robbery. Like I was running on stuff all the time. Today's reporters don't do that. They just take what you give them and then they regurgitate it. So that's that.
Yeah, that is highly true. They literally, I have literally had press releases or information that I've emailed them, cut and pasted, and not even rewritten, because I know they're cutting deadlines, and I know they've got 3 or 4 stories running simultaneously that they're working on. Anything that they can do to cut a corner, and that is why I think some of the way that we write as PIOs has changed over the years. Instead of just the narrative, we're giving them the incident, the details right away, and then giving more detail about how it unfolded later on, instead of waiting to give the meat of the press release at the very bottom, like what used to happen. All right, so let me ask this. Flip this around. What do PIOs deal with that reporters consistently underestimate?
So PI, you're talking now. Now you're talking about the reverse of what.
Flip it around. What do reporters think underestimate about PIOs?
So reporters, they don't. Well, I was saying reporters don't realize that the levels that we have to go through. But I think like PIOs have to keep in mind deadlines for reporters. They have to keep in mind that they have these deadlines to meet. And that it's a lot of pressure that is put upon them. By the and it gets into the book that I wrote about saving the beast. So we have the phrase in the industry, feed the beast. Yeah, you have to feed the beast. The beast being,
Yep.
I looked at it as the beast being the news, or you could also look at the beast being what is consuming the news, your audience. So you constantly have to uh, you constantly have to produce content, and the way that it's evolved is now we're at the point where it's any little nugget of information is satiates the audience, at least temporarily. But then there's always you've got to constantly be providing the next nugget. But a lot of times that's my role as a PIO, is just to
Right.
provide that little nugget of information, and that's good for the reporter for that moment. For that moment,
Right.
and then they can hopefully go out to the scene, or take some of their other questions and save those for the fire chief, for the police chief, things like that.
Right. What in your perspective, since switching sides, what is one moment where your perspective completely changed after you switched roles, after you became the PIO?
Yeah, I realized soon after I got hired as a PIO that I could probably do more good and have more of an impact as a PIO than I ever did as a reporter. So we were talking about earlier that kind of the stereotype that reporters have of people who work in public relations. But I realized I've got an even wider audience. I've got everybody. I need to care about everybody in this county. A reporter's only really their concern is their audience, which can be much slimmer. But I've got to
Right.
be concerned with every single person, and we have somewhere maybe like 475,000 people in this county. I've got to be concerned about all of them and getting positive messages out to them. Things that that will help them prepare for natural disasters, and things of that nature.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did you ever catch yourself thinking, I used to be part of the problem?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. So we got to a point where we kind of realized that we were. I think it's another one of my coworkers described it as, when I was in the newsroom, rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic, kind of thing. We knew that things were going south. So I don't know about anybody else. I can only speak for me. I was trying to do everything I could to keep my job. So yes, I would write, kind of clickbaity headlines, and especially with crime. So you're looking for anything. I was looking for anything that had to do with somebody being naked. You put naked in a headline, and you're going to get eyes on it. Naked, and then
Right.
something crazy, maybe an implement that was used in an assault, like a frying pan or a rolling pin or something crazy like that you wouldn't maybe regularly think. A pitchfork, whatever, you name it. If you can get that, naked drunken man, in a rampage with frying pan or whatever, that's what we're looking for. And so, and to get just to get more eyes on the product. And so, yeah, I looked at that and I said, "Yeah, okay, so I did do that, but
And it
I
happens.
was trying to survive."
Right. Absolutely. I understand that. And it happens. I mean, I have family that are in the news media currently, and, her and I always have debates over things that are said or how they're written. And she'll call me. She goes, "What does this mean? And can you give me what your perspective or what your take on it?" And I'll explain it. She goes, "That's what I thought." Okay. So she's her thought process is dynamic and open. So she's very open to looking at things in a different perspective as opposed to just the attention grabbing headline.
Oh, well, that's
So
refreshing.
it's it is. My daughter is a phenomenal journalist, an award winning journalist to begin with. And so let's talk about your book, Saving the Beast: A Recovering Reporter Reflects on Americans' Broken Media
There
and
it is.
How to Fix It. There it is.
Yeah.
What did you? Why did you feel compelled to write the book?
Yeah, so this was after I left the news business, and so then I kind of considered myself the media's worst critic or best critic, whichever you prefer. But as the old saying goes, it takes one to know one. And so I looked at, and it was part of the reason why I looked at the reasons why I left the industry. Some of it was financial. I'll admit to you. You can, more than likely you can have a better career financially, if you get into public relations. And I'll just say it, we knew that as reporters, but we kind of, that was our cross to bear. We were kind of martyrs in that sense, that we knew we weren't getting paid very much, but we did it anyway for the love of the job. But anyway, at some point in your life, you realize, wait a minute, I might need to make a change here financially. Anyway, so I looked at some of the reasons why I left the business, and that was one of them. But really, the biggest one was that it seemed as though over several decades there were numerous factors that came into play that caused a disconnect between the American public, a distrust between the American public and mainstream media, or media in general. And so I wanted to look into how that all happened. So it's three sections. The first one is kind of tracing the history. How did that happen? What was the fallout from that, from those factors? And then what could be done if a news organization decided, actually took a long hard look in the mirror and decided, hey, you know what? I'm the problem. It's me. And how do I change that? So that
Right.
was kind of the basis for it.
So is that when you say broken media? What does that look like daily? And when you're talking about that in the book?
Yes. So things like, I give the example, some of the major ones, like the Hunter Biden laptop from hell story. Well, it appears as though many news outlets actually willfully disregarded that. They said we know what's going on here, or we have an inkling of what's going on, and we're just going to shelve it. We're going to ignore it. Some say that that could have played a major role in the 2020 election, but that's the sort of thing. That's not what I would call the phrase true journalism. That's not true journalism. True journalism is you don't have this allow this ideology to creep into your journalism. You're not taking a side. You're presenting everything to the public, and you're letting them use their critical thinking. And that's another thing I think that the media thinks that their audience is not so bright and can't
Mhm.
use. They're underestimating the American public, and they're thinking that the American public can't use their critical thinking, and just so what you have to do is lay everything out there for people and let them decide, and maybe they do their own research, but you at least provide everything that you know at that point in time.
The media always goes after police officers saying that they're biased or they commit acts because of racial issues or things along those nature. But if you were to say to a reporter your writing is biased or you're politically leaning one direction or another, they'll tell you, well, no, I'm not. It's just the stories that get written. And
Well, I've got information in the book about that, because from all that I've discovered, it appears as though it starts in colleges and universities, where they're teaching students, so they're teaching them about activist journalism or advocacy journalism, where you're actually taking a side because you feel that it morally that is the side that should be taken, and the other side is wrong. And so that's where we get into the phrase that I don't know if I coined it or not, but objectivity is not a dirty word, because you have people like Christiane Amanpour, who's this lauded journalist. She actually went to University of Rhode Island, where I went to for journalism. She graduated many years ahead of me. But if she truly was under the tutelage of the professors that I was, if she took that to heart, then she would not be talking about both sidesism, which is not really a word, but she's talking about, presenting both sides, or however many sides of a story. That is journalism. That's what you're supposed to do. But she is, you know, uh, she's disparaging that and saying that, no, you have to take a moral stand. Well, then write a column, write an opinion column. That's where that goes. That doesn't
don't do the
belong.
news,
That doesn't belong in a news story. So
right? All right, so here let's get away from the politic end of it. I don't want to jump in that too much. What's the biggest misconception the public has about how news is produced?
probably the time that it takes to put everything together. So, for example, just yesterday I had a TV reporter who was at my office, and he interviewed me. He interviewed two dispatchers. Then we did a segment where a dispatcher took a mock call to show what it's like to receive a call at 911. I gave him some other footage that I had taken earlier that day about a proclamation, because it's National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So our county commissioners gave a proclamation about that. So he spent like 3 hours at my office. Then he has to go back to his office. Then he has to put all that together, edit it, and all these other things that he has to do, just for maybe what, 90 seconds, if that. So I don't know that
Yeah.
the public realizes, all of the work that goes into either a news, a written story, or something that's on television.
No, I agree with you. I think that even PIOs forget what it takes to put that together, and that is why when I have talked to reporters before, and I said, okay, how would you like it? I package stuff together for you. If I had the raw interviews for you, and I had all this stuff together, and I sent it to you, does that help you, or would you prefer I put it together? And 9 out of 10 times they would say, just send me the raw footage and give me all the information that you can give me, and I'll do it together. And it depends on the reporter. There are some that'll say, I'll take the package whole thing from start to finish
Hmm.
because it makes your life easier.
Right.
But I do know that there are producers and there are editors that don't like that.
Right. Like even emailing something. Sometimes I've emailed something in a Word document, and then I've had some reporters say, well, can you actually put the whole text of the Word document? Can you just put it right in the email too, so we have it both ways if we can't open the Word document for whatever reason? So it's little things like that.
Right. No, completely understand it. Is there a problem? Is the problem structural, cultural, economic, or all of the above?
I'm sorry, Robert, you were cutting out there. A problem with.
Is the way journalism is doing things now? Is it structural, cultural, economic, or all of the above?
I would maybe use another word, systemic, because of what I was talking about before with what's going on in colleges and universities, where that's the way that they're teaching journalists. And I can't believe it. When I figured this out, I was beside myself because I said that's certainly not the way that I was taught in the early to mid 90s.
Right.
No way was I taught that. So I couldn't believe it when I heard about that. So I think it's more of a systemic problem. It's the system that needs to change in what's being taught in colleges and universities.
Okay. So trust in media is extremely low. From your experience, what caused the decline in the trust?
Well, yeah, as we kind of alluded to, that you've got media outlets that are ignoring major news stories. Or there's another example I use in the book. After the October 7th massacre in Israel, there was a report of a missile that according to Palestinian sources, struck a hospital and killed children. Well, that turned out not to be
I
true.
remember this.
That turned out not to be true, but a lot of the mainstream media just ate that up, hook, line, and sinker, and went ahead and printed it or broadcasted it, and it turned out not to be true. So, and you kind of talked about this before about how fast things need to be turned around. So I have a phrase about the thirst to be first, the thirst to
Mhm.
be first, and usually you end up being the worst because you make mistakes when you're doing that. You're just rushing so much. You got to be you got to beat everybody else. You got to break the news. Sometimes there's consequences to that.
To me, and then this is the way I would love to believe that all journalists are, and I know some are, but many are not.
Mm.
Is I would rather if I knew story broke and I didn't have my two verified sources for it, and I'm not relying on other media to be verified sources because I have seen that happen before. And I would rather be able to debunk a story and show that I have the right one versus being first.
Right. You'd rather have the right story, and that's the way that it should be. You'd rather have it factually correct. Um,
Right.
and let the other people who are just rushing to blast it out there, let them be wrong, you know, and take the time to verify things. Yes, absolutely. That's the way that it's intended to be. That's how it's supposed to work.
You wish it would be that way, right?
Right.
All right. So can we realistically can trust realistically be rebuilt, or are we in a permanently fractured environment when it comes to that?
Right. So at the end of the book, I kind of talk about there's a paradigm shift that's going on in media. You're seeing the rise of independent and citizen journalists, guys like Nick Shirley, and there's other people like him
Yeah.
too. But right, so he went to Minnesota and uncovered a bunch of fraud. Then he went over to California, kind of same thing over there. People are gravitating to that. They're taking their time and their money and they're going elsewhere. That's why mainstream media are hemorrhaging readers and viewers, and therefore so they're losing money. So therefore they have to cut their staffs, and then there's less quality journalism, and it just keeps going around and around, and it's a vicious circle, and then we wind up with with the percentage of people who trust the media is, I believe it's at an all-time low, if I'm not
Yeah, it is.
mistaken. So back to you're saying, can it be repaired? It is possible. It's either going to go two ways. It's either going to people are going to continue to go towards the independent route, or the mainstream media is going to realize what the independent reporters are doing and adopt some of that. Like Nick Shirley right now, there's an act. It's not a law just yet, but in California, they want to try to curtail his activities. They're saying he's
Mhm.
doxing people, but really he's conducting investigative journalism. So if the mainstream media were to look at Nick Shirley and go, "Hey, this kid's onto something," then maybe would be able to get some of their audience back. But that's only part of it. The other part is I talk about, or I'm not sure if this got into the book, but let's take the Washington Post. The Washington Post decided prior to this most recent presidential election that they weren't going to endorse any candidate. They weren't going to endorse Harris. They weren't going to endorse Trump. And I totally agreed with them. I always felt just weird, like slimy almost, that when a newspaper endorsed a candidate, because that's a you're taking a, there's no more clear cut way of determining how a newspaper leans politically than to see who they're endorsing as a political candidate.
Right.
So they shouldn't be in that business at all.
But don't they get away with that by saying it's their editorial board that makes that
They can say
decision?
that, yeah. And so I guess Jeff Bezos, yeah, like, well, it depends who you talk to, but some say, well, he was just trying to curry favor with Trump, and that's why he did that. But who knows? Or you could look at it from the other side and say, okay, he's realizing that the Washington Post is going down, it's going downhill. So we gotta just really gotta turn things around. We gotta zig when everyone else is zagging, and really do a 180 here. And so they did that, even though they had a board. I think he dissolved that the board that would decide that which way they were going to go. I think he even got rid of them all. And then the LA Times followed suit. They did the same thing. They didn't endorse a candidate either. So that's a step. It's not everything, but it's a step. Look at CBS. They hired Barry Weiss. She was actually, her background was more on the liberal side, but then she kind of started leaning more towards the center or whatever, and they said, let's hire her as the top news chief. Not sure the exact title, but that's another example of just doing something that on the surface is like, whoa, this is crazy. How could this ever work? And so I was on LinkedIn, and people were saying, this is terrible, Barry Weiss, this is terrible. I said, maybe it's exactly what's needed. Why don't we look at it from another angle? If everything that CBS is doing is wrong, or is not getting them what they want as far as their audience, their numbers, and their credibility, if everything they're doing is wrong, then why not take a chance and go this way, and hire this outsider, and see what happens?
Right. I want to go back. I want to touch on the Nick Shirley thing, because you do get journalists, the way they paint him as an ultra right, almost. I think the term was like a MAGA extremist
Mhm.
in some cases, and I never got that impression of him. But there is a lot of reporting that has kind of leaned him that way,
Mhm.
and maybe to, in the event, to smear him or discredit him.
Right.
But when he was in Minnesota and he was looking at the sheer dollar amount that was being moved out of the state, out of the country, and the state of Minnesota had known about it for, I think, 10 years. They had already been told by their internal auditors and stuff at different organizations that money is going, and we don't know where it went.
Right.
So I think there is that degree of that political lean in a lot of reporting, in especially in the bigger networks, that is now turning people away from those bigger networks. And I think that's why you are seeing that turn towards the blog news,
Mhm.
the independent journalists or news people that are doing their own stuff now. I think that's why podcasts have become so big. Why you have, the Tucker Carlsons, the that girl that does Pod Force One is another one that is.
Yeah.
I can't think of her name now,
I
but
mean,
she's another one that.
Megan Kelly's very big.
Right, Megyn Kelly, all of those on their individual end of it, and they're and some lean right, some don't, some are middle of the road. But I think that is why it's pulled a lot of people away from mainstream media, is because of that.
Well, yeah, there's a couple things going on there. So the first thing is that we seem to be at this point where everybody is kind of retreating to their own echo chambers. If I feel a certain way, I'm going to go to this website or this cable network to reaffirm what I already feel, and in doing that, it's going to make me feel even better. We're very, very divided in this country. It used to be, probably when I was a kid, probably when you were a kid, we seem to be relatively the same age, but just judging by the amount of gray on our face. Walter Cronkite, right? Walter Cronkite was America's grandpa, and it didn't matter if you were a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. At 6:30, you tuned in, and he gave you the news, and you believed every word of it.
Yep.
But unfortunately, a lot's happened since then. So we've gone through this what I call like a loss of innocence, where now we don't trust anything, which is great in a sense because we're using our critical thinking. But at the same time, we've kind of become really really divided in this country, and the news reflects that. The news outlets reflect that. But back to Minnesota and what Nick Shirley did there, fraud is fraud, I would think. And it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, you should be enraged if there's fraud going on. But then when you take a step back, there is an argument to be made for, okay, well, the majority of the people that were allegedly committing these crimes, this fraud, are Somalians, and it's a big population in Minnesota. So we want to keep them happy. We want to protect them. So therefore, we're gonna sweep it under the rug. That is a or turn a blind eye, whatever. And so that's a theory that's out there about why that went on.
Hmm.
But yeah, and so you could say, well, geez, Nick Shirley, look at him. He's a white guy, and the Somalis are black, and he's going against them, so therefore he's a conservative, and boy, he's really showing his true colors. Yeah, I
Right.
don't know how much weight. I mean,
Yeah. I don't want to jump into we're jumping in kind of deep into that. I don't want to dig too much down into this because I try to keep this podcast non-political just for
understood.
that very reason because I don't want to dig into the political end of it. So let's leave it at that point, and I want to
Sure.
come back to talking about advice. So from your book, if you could give a reporter a piece of advice when dealing with public safety, what would it be? One piece of advice.
When dealing with public safety, just a respect for law enforcement and the job that they do and the difficulties that they encounter day in and day out. I think I was able to develop that as a criminal justice major in college, and the internships that I had, and then some of the jobs that I had afterwards. I was a security officer, I was a park ranger, so I was able to develop that deep respect for law enforcement. And bearing in mind that there are some bad apples out there, but by and large, the majority of them are doing their jobs to the best of their ability. They're serving and protecting the public. So I think not starting from the point of law enforcement bad, and then that's, I think, some journalists start from that point, and then maybe try to maybe work back a little bit from that. That's the wrong attitude to have.
Okay, so let's switch it around. If you could give PIOs one piece of advice when dealing with the media, what would it be?
Well, I would say, don't let the media drive you. You drive the media. You are the driver. Don't let the media drive you. Don't be afraid to put your foot down if you need to. For example, I had a reporter that set up a meeting or an interview with somebody else in the 911 office. So I kind of brokered that interview. Then she called me and she said, "You know what? I can't make the interview. Can we reschedule?" So I went to the guy and we rescheduled it. Then she called me again. "Oh, I need to reschedule." I said, "No, no, 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 no. We're gonna continue to waste this guy's time and keep giving him the runaround. Let's hold to this, and if they want you to interview him, this is when he's gonna be available." And I have other stories too, but that's just one of where, yeah, you
Okay.
just have to put your foot down sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about this. So dealing with a reporter like that, where do those relationships break down the most? Speed, accuracy, access, or trust?
Oh my. I mean, yeah, it might be. Well, I think all. I'd say all of the above. Um,
Okay.
where I see it from my point of view, from my experience, maybe I would lean more towards the trust than anything else. We had an unfortunate incident where an officer was killed in the line of duty here in 2025. Actually, there were there were there were two incidents, but one I'm thinking of in particular was at UPMC Memorial Hospital, Officer Andrew Duarte. And so for his funeral, the procession was coming from the funeral home to the church, and the media knew that they weren't supposed to be there at the funeral home. We had a space for them, a dedicated space for them at the church. But I found out later that somebody from one of the media outlets had gone to the funeral
Mm,
home. So that's a trust thing. We trusted them not to do that. They did it anyway, and so I had to have a word with that person afterwards. Yeah,
understood.
it's a trust thing. It's like, look, I'm going to do, as a PIO, I'm going to do everything I can for you because I've been there. I was a reporter for 25 years. I know what it's like to work on deadline, have your editors yelling at you. So I'm going to do everything I can for you, but on your end, you know, don't betray my trust.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about breaking incident. You have limited information. There's high pressure to get something out. What should a good reporter do?
Well, I mean, okay, I'll take for example one of the things that happened in 2025 was it was another terrible incident, and so I've got reporters that are calling me, that are bombarding me with questions, and that's fine. I accept that. But just have just a little bit of patience. You know that I need to confer with my bosses to see what's the message. What is the message that we're trying to communicate, that is going to accurately reflect what's going on, but not jeopardize anything at the same time. And maybe that's another thing for reporters is to realize the delicate balance that we as PIOs walk with that. We want to give you as much information as we can. However, there are other things at play where, like I said, we don't want to jeopardize an investigation or an active incident. So just to be mindful of that, I think is
Okay,
would be
so
great.
let's throw this on the other side. For what should a good PIO do when they have breaking incident, limited information, and there's high pressure to put something out?
They have to get something out as soon as they can, but they have to couch it with, look, this is all I can give you at this point in time. So for the which I mentioned before, the UPMC memorial incident, when I got to the scene, I found out where the media were. They were sequestered in they were behind the hospital, like as far as they could be on the property, but so they were way behind the hospital. I found out where they were, and I had my message, and then I found the incident commander, and I said, look, do you mind if I go give them this statement? I had already put it out on social media, but what I wanted to do was give them the visual. I don't know, this ugly mug. I wanted to, because I knew there were cameras. There were lots of cameras. So I said, well, I'm going to give them the same statement I gave them before, but I'm going to give it to them so they can record it visually. And so that's what I did, and hopefully it was appreciated. And actually, I gave them the statement. Then I had something that I added to it because there was a hotline that people could call if they thought that a loved one was inside the hospital when this incident occurred. They could call that hotline and they could talk with somebody, a representative of the hospital, to figure that out if their loved one was in there or not. So
Right, right.
hopefully they appreciated it.
Nick, let's get back, or Ted, let's get back to your book. What do you hope readers take away from your book?
Well, I hope they take away that this didn't happen overnight. That the change in the media, or that the trust that was there, that existed between the American public and the media, that it happened over time. It eroded over time, but that there is hope. I think it's a book of hope that something can be done truly if the media wanted it to. But they need to take a long hard look, as I said, a long hard look in the mirror and go, you know what? Maybe I'm the problem. Maybe I'm the one that needs to change. And then so basically just laying all that out there for people and letting them decide. Do I want to continue, to support the mainstream media, or do I want to go more with the independent route? And so just laying everything out there for folks.
All right, so where can people find your book?
It's on Amazon. That's probably the best way. But any online bookseller should have it. Whether it's Books a Million, or Barnes and Noble. But it's on Amazon as well. So that's who I went through for it. I published independently, and so that's the way that a lot of people do it these days. They publish independently. There's only about like
Yeah,
five publishing houses, so
that's the best thing about Amazon. It made it much easier to get your own stuff out there.
yeah.
Absolutely. Ted, what is one uncomfortable truth both for journalists and PIOs that they need to hear?
Uncomfortable truth for journalists would be that, well, it's a great job if you're single and you don't have any kids and you're willing to crisscross the country for the bigger, better deal. There's a guy I worked with in York. He then went to California for a couple of years. Now he's in Memphis, and he's a single guy. He doesn't have kids. He loves being in around in urban environments, in cities, working in cities, and he loves the grind of newspapers, and so that's a great thing. But at some point, like when I got to York, I said, you know what, I'm going to spend about 4 years here, get a lot of experience, and then I'm going to move up to a metro paper like Philly or Baltimore, and that never happened. Maybe they just didn't want me. I don't know. I got, I kind of got dug in here in York. We had kids. I got married. We had kids. Our kids started, making friends and playing sports and getting involved in school and everything. And so then you just kind of, you make of it what you can. So that's for reporters. For PIOs, kind of back what I was saying before about the delicate balance between you really want to help reporters, but at the same time, that's you could classify that as external communications, but you've got to have the internal communications first. You gotta have that. When you find out about something, talk it over with your boss, confer with people, and it's like as a reporter, I was very independent. Yeah, I had an editor, but you know, I just it attracts mavericks, it attracts independent people, and so then as a PIO, you've got to think, hey, I'm part of something bigger now. I'm a cog in the wheel. And so I really need to beef up my internal communications. And the other thing too is kind of related to that is know where your gaps are in your, you have your strengths, but where are your gaps? What are those in your skills? And then what can I do to strengthen those and to bridge those gaps?
Ted, is there a question I should have asked? And if so, how would you have answered?
Question that you should have asked me. Yeah, that's good.
I know I threw a lot at you. I know I threw a lot at you.
Yeah. No, yeah, I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. All right. So let's go to some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Phone call, voice memo, FaceTime. What's your go-to?
I like the phone the best. Yeah, the phone. Yeah, we're doing it rapid.
Streaming binge or weekend read. What's your ideal escape?
It's a streaming, but I love books. I just, I do streaming.
Morning ritual, sunrise workout, quiet coffee, or news scroll?
It's a combination. It's coffee and the news scroll. It's both.
If you could adopt any animal, real or mythical, what would it be?
A liger, a lion and a tiger.
Nice. What is the one song that always gets you moving no matter your mood?
One song that gets me moving. It's kind of obscure. It's called Heart of a Lion. It's by a band called Racer X. It was a heavy metal
Okay, I've heard of
heavy
them.
metal band out of Los Angeles. Yeah, Paul Gilbert,
Yeah.
player.
Yeah. All right. Time travel or teleportation? Which power would you pick and why?
I would say teleportation. I can't think of how many times. Man, I wish I could just boom and I'm there. But rather than time travel is like, don't mess with that. You can't mess with time. It's already happened. Don't worry about it.
No, if you do, you never know. You could end up in that paradigm and wipe yourself out or something.
Right. Yeah, don't mess with time. Don't mess with time.
Which historical figure would you want to shadow for a day, not just meet?
What I want to shout? Teddy Roosevelt.
Very interesting person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Final thoughts. What key points would you like listeners to take from today's interview?
That there's the PIO work is just one facet of public relations, but it is something that people should consider. I think when they when they get into public relations, they might think, let me get into kind of a boutique or the private sector, but public sector serving the public can be very fulfilling.
As we wrap this up, is there a piece of wisdom or a motto that you live by?
Well, I like the phrase earlier that I said about objectivity is not a dirty word. I like that one, but like it's like you're talking about like a personal mantra.
Yeah. No, could be either or. Yeah. It's either or. It's your choice.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. No, I like the one
how about tempus fugit memento mori? Time flies, remember that.
There you go. All right, how can people best reach you if they want to connect?
Geez, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. LinkedIn is probably my jam these days. I really like LinkedIn.
And I will add the LinkedIn link on the show notes as well as a link to your book in Amazon. So if the listeners or viewers want to see it or connect to it, they'll be able to get it that way.
Well, thank you, Robert. I really appreciate that.
Ted, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been great.